Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Aya Om podcast. This is the second podcast I'm doing as a reflection on my ayahuasca experience in Peru. I haven't released the first one, and I recorded it the day after I came back from the ayahuasca experience, so I don't know if I had fully landed yet, and I wasn't fully, well, not still fully integrated, but I was still integrating quite a lot, so I don't know if I'll release that one. But in that one, I shared more of a journey quest and what was happening and my kind of more day-to-day, week-to-week. This one is more going to be on the reflections as to what I'm bringing home. And I feel like the story is, of course, interesting, but what I can offer, which has a lot of value to individuals listening, is some of the jewels from the inner work. Yeah, I feel like that's a very transmittable piece, because when one person heals, we all heal, and there's a sharedness. We can learn from one another when somebody goes through something and we listen, we experience a piece of that in our own way, and it can help us to, in some sense, parallel process what's going on for us. So I was out in Peru for a month, and I did 11 ceremonies with ayahuasca and did a lot of inner work in that time. And the way that I track my inner work is I have a holistic coaching system that I created. It's got 8 main limbs, and I'm not going to do a comprehensive talk on that, but just as a window into it, I focus a lot on what I'm calling in, my dream, my vision for my life, my dharma, my highest path, and what that looks like, what that feels like. Very important, what that feels like. How do I want to feel? This is my understanding of an essential responsibility of mine, is to not allow circumstances to guide my state in a way that I become a victim of that. I can choose my state, and part of choosing my state is aligning my mind and my energies in accordance with my highest knowing of my purpose and what I came here to do, and what truly is a sacred desire. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm using that in a way we can talk about desire in a kind of negative sense. I'm saying there is beautiful desires, and when they're aligned desires, and the desires are what one could say is like what the soul desires to experience, these are good. These are good in that way. So part of that work is to continue to clarify that dream, and the work there is to feel what truly resonates with me, the environments, the things that I think about, what allows me to feel like I'm not there in the sense of the personality self, and like I am there in the sense of the part of me that is connected to everything else, my personal center of the soul, but its connection to the realm above and below and all around, the vibrational energy of everyone. And there's a way that when I'm acting from my dharma, from my purpose, I'm not the center of my stage, I'm a part of that drama. And it's the most freeing state, because I'm pursuing what I love, and I am acting from my authentic center. And when you act from the center, your real center, is not energetically taxing like it is to act from the false self, which is a kind of habitual tension energy. In some sense, there's a restriction of the natural free-flowing energy as it comes out from source, from the center. And when we can act in vibrational alignment to that, it's like the path of least resistance. Yeah. So I scaffold my holistic coaching system, and I look at balance, yin and yang. I look at the energies of heaven and earth. I look at the 4 dimensions of self: mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, the 5 elements as they relate to various organ systems, the 6 major zones of the body, the 7 chakras, the 8 limbs of yoga, and the 8-point wheel of Dhamma, of the Buddhist tradition. So that's a lot to go over, and I'm not going to go over all that. I'm just going to look at the chakras today. The chakras and their major headings. I don't even know if we'll make it to the end of that, because sometimes when I do the chakras, I realize how much are packed into each one of those beautiful, rotating, spiraling discs of love. So let's start in finances. Let's start at the root and rise, and let's see where we get to. So first chakra has much more associations than I'm going to speak about. I'm going to talk particularly about the finances, the relationship to abundance, yeah? So in my process in the last few years as an entrepreneur, new business owner, I've been able to get to know my relationship with abundance on a whole bunch of different levels and through many beautiful experiences. One, quitting my job, starting an entrepreneurship, getting different streams of income, having various challenges come up in that time and not having the safety net I once did with a reliable paycheck. So there's all these experiences that have been showing me where my true conditioning is. Because when I'm empowered in the belief system that is preferable for me, that is in alignment with the highest truth that I know and universal law, is that I have everything I need when I need it. And I've been working with that mantra, you could say, in the first center to help to decondition any fear-based beliefs and scarcity beliefs. So as things came up in my past, I would come back to that truth. I have everything I need when I need. Because the initial trigger is a big bill or something that is beyond what I know to be charted in my finances and my financial future as I know it in that limited moment. But as I shift the mind into I have everything I need when I need, it drops me out of fight or flight, which is triggered by the initial incident, and it brings me back to a regulated state where I can perceive opportunities, yeah? I'm deconditioning those old patterns and the limitation that they have internally and externally. So I've been working a lot with those in the last few years. And one of the ways in which I deprogram my system is to see the fear-based beliefs for what they are, limiting beliefs, understand the emotion behind them, feel that emotion and clear it from the body. And there's much to clear, yeah? And then to program in the new belief. I have everything I need when I need, I am abundant, etc. So part of that work is the purging, which I did a lot of there. I went into a big fear response, and part of that is the cultivating. Cultivating is a beautiful word in the Qigong conversations. In the Qigong world, they talk about cultivation of Qi, of energy, in the lower Dantian particularly, but cultivation of emotions, cultivation of states. As a conscious being, more and more we have the capacity to cultivate or to choose our state and to continue to deepen our awareness into that experience. This is what we do a lot of the times in devotional practice, cultivating a state of love, yeah? So, why I'm leading you into this is that a lot of my experience there was also cultivating what it feels like to be in abundance. It is ultimately the state that is always here, but it's so much easier to feel it at certain times, such as when you're in Peru on what could be called a vacation, a time in which I'm in ceremony. I'm doing what I love most. It's most obvious to feel good and to give gratitude and to see the abundance of what is in this state, yeah? So I was going so deep into it that I could basically rewrite every cell of my being to be in harmony with the state that is. Now my integration is to continue to maintain that vibration. This is like a level of meditation, yeah? I'm remembering that feeling and I'm programming into my system by stabilizing what that feels like and what comes with it, the certain belief systems, the emotional state, and how my body reacts physically. And I'm allowing this to reprogram me in my ordinary life, because it's one thing to experience that in a ceremonial container where everything is, in a sense, set up to tap into the pure potential. It's another thing to go out into the life and to continue to maintain that. And that comes with repetition of certain things that I say, the mantra, for example, and certain practices. So I did a whole lot of work on this stuff, yeah? And one of the things was to chart out a very specific goal of how much money I want to make by next year and how much money I want to make 5 years. And it's not necessarily going to go this way, but I made a plan. I made several plans, but I made a plan that I find the most preferable plan of how I could make that money. So I got to the projected future of what is preferable for me. It's still in the realm of what's called realistic. It's not like I'm saying I want to be a billionaire by tomorrow. And I've charted a path in which, with my current projections of where I'm at now, of what seems manageable, there's some little jumps in that of things that I don't know how to do, because if I didn't know how to do them, it would just be a projection of where I'm at in the future. But there's some leaps in there that I've added in there. And that's just one possible pathway. By creating that pathway, what I'm doing in my mind is I'm seeing the goal and I'm seeing how real it could be. And so long as I can look to this goal and kind of bracket limiting beliefs and have faith in it, it cultivates a certain state in me. This feeling, this state is so essential. This state is more essential than the plan. Because the plan is there. It's like the masculine sense of having a goal and knowing the steps. But the feminine sense is the internal state and the maintenance thereof. In essence, in truth, I will just let go of the plan if need be. If the deeper feeling that comes up within me, my intuition, pulls me in a different direction. Because I don't want to grip to that plan in the way that I've seen it, which would be in the past from where I'm at now, and grip to it in a way where I need it to go as I want it to go, because I'm dreaming it up with the limitations of that mind, the mind that dreamt it up. And as things go on, a year or 2 years, my mind is completely evolved. My desires might have changed. How it might look is often completely different than we imagine it to be. So focusing on the feeling is so important, and having enough forward momentum, which comes from the plan and the small steps one can take each day, brings one into a relationship with the masculine and the feminine forces of life, the moving forward and the turning within. So I did a number of plans, projections with that. And then I built them into a system that I call the Daily Devotional Decree, Triple D, or just the Daily Devotional, or just my devotional. Or you can really call it whatever you want if you want to use it on your own. I just like, what do we call those? Alliteration? I love alliteration. So I made the Daily Devotional Decree, which is a few sections with a series of phrases that align my mind with my prayer. I might make a whole episode on this one. So I'm just going to leave that one out and not talk about the Daily Devotional Decree at great length. Just know that it is comprehensive. You could say it's an intention setting, but it's not just words. There's a number of different activations that are the result of the internal shifts that I make as a result of the declarations that I'm making. And it sets me up, like I do the prayer in a certain way, which has, you could say, like body positions. It's a fully embodied prayer, and there's movements of energy, breath, and there's certain internal principles that I activate within my inside body, you could say, and external principles of the way I align my system in accordance with the way that I want to show up, in accordance with the most optimal way that I know how to be in this embodied experience. Now, I mentioned that I took my goal, and I projected it into the future of what I may want, say 5 years growth of my business or whatever it is, And then as an exercise to help expand my mind, I imagined the mind of God. Has all the knowledge, is not bound by limitation. Now, by using the imagination force, I don't know. By using the force of imagination, sounds more correct. By using the force of imagination, what I did is I looked at all my current limitations in the belief systems, and I felt the associated emotions. I don't have enough. What does that feel like, etc. And then I got real serious in the sense of dropping into the reality of what is, because, I fool myself sometimes. I don't know if you do this, but I fool myself sometimes in thinking that I'm better than I am to protect myself. And sometimes I do the opposite of that. And I think better of myself. And sometimes I don't think as good as I am. Like I don't see myself clearly. So I did my best to clarify this. And anyone could do this anytime. And it's an excellent exercise. But there's certain times when we're feeling really good and when we're willing to see truth, and this can take some time to really drop into that we're more available to actually see who we are. Like, I know in the past, I've done some spiritual work and I've got like a glimpse at myself, and it like scared the shit out of me because of how many imbalances were in my body when I really felt my system. Felt like I was just going to fall apart. And I'm fairly healthy. Like, it's hard to even see it correctly at a certain point because you can get a glimpse at what you're not usually seeing. And you see a lot of the limitations that you usually don't hold in your conscious mind, yeah? This is my experience, at least. This is not things that I held in my conscious mind. And it's possible to see yourself. And the fear, the scariness of it is like, there's so many depths and layers to us. And there's a lot of things we hold in our shadow, and sometimes catching a glimpse at this can have that startling effect. And the work is to continue to shine the light inside, continue to look within, to feel without all the guardings that we can get into in our conditioning, with shame that might come up and guilt that might come up and not feeling safe to feel. Not feeling safe to know ourselves as we truly are, because at such a young age we bought into ways of acting for good reason, for valid reason when we were young. But conditioning or the resonance from those times may not actually be the pathway of least resistance. They may not be who we or prefer to be at this moment in our evolution. We have that time to help to give us contrast. We have that time for many important reasons. So, jumping back to where we're at, a little tangential on this one. I looked at all my limitations, and as best as I could, I looked at my shadows. And then what I did was I looked at the mind of God and applied it to myself. And I was like, how do I stretch my limitations as an exercise, as a visualization? How do I stretch myself beyond all my problems and challenges? What are the possible pathways? And at first I started off just like, well, I could win $1 million. I could get an opportunity to work with this health coach, and I could, just doing things that, I've seen individuals do. I've seen them in the manifest reality. And then I got more playful with it, and I was like, well, I could grow wings and I could fly. And then I started to expand out and out and out. And then I came back in and then out. And this kind of playfulness allowed the imaginative force to work from its contracted state of being close and to its most expansive state. And the vacillation, the oscillation, or however you want to picture the mind breathing in and breathing out, was allowing me to come into the awareness of my contracted state and my most expansive state of knowing, and to dance between those until there was less of a differentiation between one or the other, and the mind had an opportunity to reach a new level of awareness and anchor a piece of itself somewhere there. Still being aware of the limitation, the contracted self, but having a greater grasping of the limitless potential that is available in each and every moment. And to the degree I continue to tap into this expansive mind and to work the imaginative force, it becomes a much more dominant force in my thinking. Not ordinary thinking with words, but the kind of thinking that takes place without words. The more expansive, non-linear trajectory of energy and matter. And through this, I was able to see solutions in ways that I've never seen before. And I continue to walk into my life and look around at the same familiar walls of my apartment, but seeing everything completely different, because though the house is the same, I've changed. my mind has transformed. As a side note, I walked into my place and I fell on my knees and I started crying because I was so grateful for the life that I have. So grateful because I came home and, as I mentioned, there's so many blocks that I was carrying and the negative emotions that go with them, that I was out of harmony with myself. So I couldn't see life the way it was because I was running from myself. I was lying to myself in so many ways that I didn't realize that I was already living the life that I had dreamed about. It's already perfectly flowing, set in motion. And it had just been my relationship to my desires and goals. I was experiencing them as being way off. I was too caught into what I didn't have that I didn't realize what I did have, what I do have. And I came home and I rubbed my finger on the wall, like embracing a child. And I really, I knew it would all change. I saw the impermanence of it all. I saw how much effort I put in and was trying to hold it down when I just needed to soften and surrender in and connect with the mind that knows all, the higher mind. So it's a little tangent. So let's go to the second chakra. We're 20 minutes in, so we're a little bit behind schedule on an hour podcast. We'll see how we do. So the second center has to do with creativity and creative essence, sexual essence. The piece I'd like to share is I drew a lot. Pencil drawings. Love pencils. 99% of the time I write with pencils. Try not to write with pens very often. Not my thing. No judgment of you and your pens. Just don't like pens as much. It's just how it is. It's preferable in that way. I do have a few pens. I like pens, but it's not preferable. So drawing, I got back into drawing and I drew as a kid. It's one of the first creative outlets that I had. And then it got tied into something that didn't work for me. And that is, I drew for myself. I drew and I would often just destroy what I drew right after. And just kind of, if it's paper, crumple it up, throw it away. And there's something beautiful there, kind of like how a Buddhist does a mandala. They create it and then they just rinse it away a lot of the time, depending on who's building the mandalas. And I did it, and then my parents knew that I was drawing and hide it from them. And it got out that I drew, and then it was encouraged, which was, of course, none of these things are done by the parents intentionally. But it was encouraged a lot, and there was talk about, I should go and paint like Walt Disney, and you're going to be the next Walt Disney, and we can help support that. And it was all very good, but it put a pressure on me, as a kid that I didn't like, and I lost the essence of why I drew, which was for my own creative expression. It was drawing pictures for people. And then it added this whole other dimension that at the time, it took me out of the creative essence. So I couldn't draw for many years, or I thought I couldn't draw, and I judged my drawings of whether they were good or bad and whether people liked them. And I still continued to draw a bit, but it transitioned more and more into like tracing, because I didn't feel like my drawings were good and they weren't as good as the ones that I could see. So I just traced and made cards for people, and I still drew a lot through teenage years and those through tracing. But it's not until recently when I started drawing again from my own imagination, from connecting within. And one of the first things I drew was a beautiful Asian woman. And I'd seen a picture of this Asian woman, and it was a drawing of the woman. And I looked at it and I saw beauty. I saw a kind of beauty that I felt like I had a connection with that artist and the being that they created through the art, and I wanted to draw something beautiful. So I was inspired to draw beautifully. So I looked at it and I created my own, and when I look at something and create my own, it never looks the same. So my being that I created was someone that I found beautiful. And I took a lot of time to draw her eyes, and I took a lot of time to take care of this drawing. And it reconnected me with the love of creating and caring about what I create, not creating for anyone else, but just because it feels good to create. And there's certain things that I like to create, and I will give myself to them. There's a connection to me in an aspect of my soul, my feminine nature, that wants to create in a beautiful and loving and present way. There's a lot of presence that goes into it. There's like a consciousness that I offer to it, right? Because anyone can do anything. And, well, that's not true. Anyone can do certain things at certain times. And they do them in different ways depending on the degree of consciousness that they offer to that activity. For example, I practice a yogic or meditation art most every day, but there's degrees to which I actually show up consciously to that practice, fully embodied, fully present, emotionally there, mentally there, physically there, relaxed into my system, willing to be there, devotionally there. There's degrees to which we offer ourselves, and to the degree we can become total, in my understanding, that's our highest prayer. And that can be just drawing. That can be whatever you doing when you doing what you love. Yeah? So when we fully show up, this is us fully saying yes to life. So I reconnected with an aspect of myself which I hadn't been saying yes to. And from that opening in the drawing and creativity, it opened up so many other doors. And the funny thing, funny retrospectively, is that I'd put off drawing in the last year or two because I've been an entrepreneur. And in being an entrepreneur, the way that I've adopted that in my previous patterning is to devote everything to it. As much as I can do, I'm always coming back to my work and what I can do. And a lot of this is fueled, yes, by inspiration, but also by survival. Now, I'm not so much in the survival phase of my business as I was when I first started, but a lot of those patterns still exist because they prime my system. When we're working from a place of survival and we integrate patterns, they can often get very deeply woven, such as bad eating habits that go along with stressful periods of life, right? Because they come coping mechanisms. So being a workaholic in the negative sense is something that I developed from those survival patterns. Now, there's a difference between me offering service 24/7 in the way that I love to, and me being a workaholic and working 24/7. Yeah? Because when I'm doing it out of inspiration and love, because I'm living my dharma, I'm okay to work 7 days a week all the time. I don't want to do anything else. I'm living my fully inspired, embodied life of mission and purpose. But when I'm workaholic, I'm sourcing my actions from a whole different level of energy and intention. And that's where there's a muck. Yeah? So I didn't allow myself the time to do what I really loved. So I was denying a part of myself. And in that denial, I didn't have access to drawing, which opened up so many doors, which is the part of the story I'm at right now. So it opened up doors to touch into my visual capacity, to see things in 3 dimensions in my own mind, which is a capacity that I cut off because I wasn't drawing from my own mind. I wasn't tapping into my imaginative capacity. This allowed me to see energy. As somebody who works in the field of energy work and energy healing, I've had a creative block in some sense. I had not been tapped into my higher psychic sensitivity of seeing energy because I had blocked that aspect, and it was showing up in the manifest realm as me blocking my capacity to create from the limitless potential that is all around. It also helped me to further the process of what I've been talking about before, touching into the imaginative capacity of the world, of the God mind, yeah? So I was able to see And there's multiple levels to the meaning of see beyond my limitation. And one particular example I can give is I've been working a lot with my body alignment. I'm healing my body from many years of holding it out of alignment and building the fascial networks to be quite counterintuitive to the optimal functioning of the body. And there's a lot of complexity to the body as we get into the body of energy, the energy body that runs like a blueprint underneath the physical structuring. And a capacity to visualize or see the internal body was opened up because of my capacity to touch into this imaginal realm. It was cultivating an external capacity to draw, to create, but also the internal capacity to create the inner architecture of my mind and body. And it opened me into a greater capacity to live. You could say it's like more harmoniously between the left and the right hemispheres. It's like a creative capacity to see the underlying architecture of story and archetype. And this was tapped into via the imaginative capacity, which was opened up through my drawing. But it's like polarity between seriousness and play. When we're in the seriousness mode, we're often contracted into a limited framework, often run by survival mechanisms of seeing things how we think they are. And this is it. This is reality. This is the, the dominant cultural myth, whatever it might be that we've been alluded into. And then seeing the underlying architecture of the storybook framework of life as a drama opens up the mind to enact archetypal roles within that drama. And there's definitely less resistance that comes when we are playing our role into full embodiment. We allow that to come forth. But also there's a freedom. There's a freedom that comes when we take charge of our state. We can take charge of our mind to write the script, to be the one authoring our story. And for me, the imaginative capacity to visualize and to create certain it's like I'm letting the grip of my mind's limitation of how my mind functions so that I can move beyond my mind and tap into the mind of God or the mind of heaven and earth, the energetic fields and consciousness that aren't just the limitations of my mind and body as the center, but opening my mind into the greater center. And there's various levels of energy, like vibration, and these vibrations can take on patterns. And the patterns, especially when interacted with the mind, can be worked with in a way which makes dreaming, like imagination, like active dreaming during the day as well as dreaming during the night, more vivid. There's much more complexity and capacity. There's much more potential to play with. There's like a higher level of dimensionality that becomes available, not just expressing life through the basic geometries. There's a higher level that becomes available, and there's a outstretching, and that process was I worked with that as I started to draw more, and I started to understand myself through these drawings. Most people are familiar with our subconscious speaking through the drawings. I would say the soul speaking through the drawings. And there's things I like to draw. There's certain animations. I draw a lot of anime because it's a particular style that really attracts me. And there's certain scenes and there's certain images that I'll draw at certain times. So as I started to draw in a regular way, like most days, I would find that I would be drawn to different things. And what I was really doing here, or at least at one level, is going away from like getting online and like what kind of YouTube do I want to watch? And yes, it's amazing to have all this tailored content. But I was learning more and more to not be connected to that world in that way, but to look within and see that I can create the most beautiful movies in my own mind. And I can be the central individual, the protagonist, would that be? The protagonist of my story. I can be a role, well, I'm technically the villain in my own story too at times, depending on where I'm at in my process and understanding myself in the polarities. So that was very helpful in my capacity to step into greater empowerment in writing my own story. Because I can use visualization 24/7. I can be in a constant state of that. And this took a momentum in my life. It's like before, thoughts are quite passive. They come to me passively and I'm just like listening to myself think, yeah? You've been there, yeah? And just the mind's just like talking. And there's a way to be non-reactive to the mind, and I've learned that, and I'm still learning that through meditation. But there's also a capacity we have to take charge of the mind and direct it. And that's what I spent a lot of time doing. Instead of just allowing those thoughts to come, especially the cyclical thoughts, they just kind of rotate around the head. They're nothing new, they're nothing inspiring. What if I took control of the mind and started to offer my energy to the mind and create with the mind? And I found myself creating a lot in this way. And I was going to talk about this later, but we're in a good way to get there. So let's get there. I started doing these traveling journeys where I would imagine myself leaving my body in a kind of spirit form and then traveling. And this capacity grew, and it was kind of like I was doing it a bit consciously. There was like this effort of me imagining. But then there was also like this guidance, partly from me and my higher soul, the deeper parts of me than the conscious mind, yeah? And then partly from ayahuasca. And what would happen is I would have a understanding of where I might like to go. I'd like to go to the underworld and create a portal down and begin to descend through the layers. And part of that was me imagining, yeah? And then I would let my mind fill in some of the spaces. Because as I stepped more and more into this, it became more and more vivid, and I wasn't needing to imagine as an effortful process all the things. Things were starting to come to me. And there was like this lever I could play with between how much I was intending and how much I was allowing, right? So I could work with the deeper aspects of my own mind in this relationship. It was a dance. It was never me completely controlling and never me completely just allowing. There was like a relationship there. It's kind of like how we relate to our body and how we relate to the mind. We can't completely control the body, nor do we want to, but we don't just completely allow ourselves to just let the body do its things. There's a relationship. Same with emotions. There's a certain guidance we can have, but we don't want to completely control. Otherwise, we wouldn't feel things spontaneously. We wouldn't just allow things to come up. And that's the beauty, that's the harmony of life, is when we can find ourselves not needing to shift into either poles with a kind of urgency, with a kind of, there's just a grace to do it, and that's what keeps us in harmony in the yin and yang forces. So I would travel to the earth and contact the consciousness of the earth. And I don't know where you're at. I don't know what your relationship with the earth is. I've learned that the earth is living. And at first I used to just say that, and it was kind of like, it was intellectually I grasped something that I knew deeply, but I hadn't embodied that knowledge in a way that it was experiential. So I knew conceptually that the earth is a being, but I didn't actually relate to it as that for some time. And over time, I'm learning how to connect with the consciousness of the earth, which is the same capacity as connecting with the consciousness of another human being or any other being in all of our relations, from the stone people to the trees. There's a capacity we have, and I know this within myself, there's a capacity that I have to connect with the consciousness of the earth. And like any relationship, there's an intimacy there, there's a communication, there's a certain bracketing of our own thoughts and our own mind so that we can actually listen to another individual. This individual being the earth. There's an opening, there's a receptivity, there's a dynamic to the energy exchange. And my time in Peru allowed me to spend a lot of time communing with the consciousness of earth and being in a space of no mind for long periods, longer than I've ever experienced, and being able to connect not just with the earth, with the cosmos. And these were other journeys that I made upwards, going into portals in the sky and communing with beings on the sun who live in perpetual dance and motion because the sun has no night, and going into other planets and seeing their temples from different star systems. And once again, carrying on a theme here, it's like expanding into the mind of God, the limitless capacity to move beyond the limitation that is everything that I'd once known myself as the personal mind and body. And the structuring of my mind had you could think like a ceiling to what was possible. And when that begins to become more diffuse, the limitation, then there's more room for expansion, and there's so much more capacity to go in within the individual to the center and reside there in the center, which is a beautiful place of peace. And to go out, there's like this relationship, the deeper one goes in, the further they can go out. So to know the depths of the earth and know the heights of the heavens and stars, there is a relationship between how deeply one knows themselves. And at a certain point, you realize you can go as far in as you can go out, and that there's no real separation between those two. So there's this like blurring of the lines of separation and the imaginative process, and going beyond the physical, because a lot of this was done not just in the drawings, but also in meditative spaces to allow the body to be still and let the mind go. And I have been a meditative for probably about 12 years. And for most of that, I was practicing meditation and never really meditating, as in meditation, and my understanding, is a state of being. And till that time, when I say I was practicing, it means I was trying to meditate. I was sitting for long periods of time and listening to my thoughts. And for very small parts of that, experiencing being, experiencing presence without mental chatter. And I've been learning more and more to quiet the mind. And a lot of this was not due to needing 12 years to learn to meditate, just poor instruction. I was meditating on my own for many years and never received proper instruction. And as I've worked with very skilled teachers, there is actually a way to calm the mind. And I realize that most people, my projection or analysis, are in that stage of still trying to quiet the mind and never really experiencing the being of meditation. As I started to experience the being of meditation, this allowed me to work at these levels of the mind, because the mind was pacified in that good way. It was quieted down enough so that I could commune with the earth, so that I could commune with the deeper parts of me that aren't just the mind, yeah? And part of me reaching deeper states of no mind was disentangling all the mind programs, like the viruses of the mind that kept me addicted to thinking, because I say mind viruses in that kind of derogatory sense because they're fear-based. When I would just go sit, I'm on quote unquote vacation. I'm in ceremony. I'm in a healing space. There's nothing that I need to worry about in terms of work. I'm safe. Ideally, in my understanding, the preferable thing to happen there would I would be able to relax deeper and deeper into a state of contentment and ease, because that's what the environment is offering out. There's nothing actively going on. So what I became witness to was the fears. And they're not obvious. They don't jump out as big, scary things. But the fear calls forth the mind. It calls forth, oh, we still need to do this. Oh, we still need to do this. You're familiar with this? The mind constantly thinking of things it needs to do. And when I get at a deeper layer of why it's asking me to do that, it comes down to things like, oh, I don't have enough. There's not enough time. What if I don't achieve my potential? I'm not good enough. All these things that they're not showing up as those stories, but as I get underneath things. And the more I can get underneath things, I'm going deeper and deeper. And as I'm sitting longer and longer, just witnessing and allowing and creating and loving, eventually, everything just becomes silent. As I take responsibility for what I'm actually responsible for. My thoughts, my words, my actions, my reactions, my state, setting my mind in alignment to what I do want, what is representative of who I am, my authentic vibration. And when I let go of my attachment to expectation, to the way I may want things, when I let go of the timing of things, when I let go of circumstances outside of myself, when I stop giving my power away, in all of these ways, all that power comes within. And with more energy awareness and mastery of that energy, Qigong, I can move that energy throughout my system. And you know the phrase, he's in his head. There's a literal pointing there of the energies being up in the head into the mental process, which is very much associated with the brain. And as the energies in the system lower down into the heart and into the lower dantian, the energy center at the core of the body, this is the place of no mind, where thinking isn't the dominant stream of consciousness, where sensation and feeling can become more dominant. And as I began to let go of more and more the guarding that I had often placed around myself, and I got more and more real with myself, therein I increased my capacity to say yes to life and feel the highs and the lows. And for a lot of the experience, especially in the first week and a half, it was quite discomforting, because these are all the things that I've been running from that I didn't have space to, quote unquote, to feel. So as all this stuff started coming out, my mind was, in a beautiful way, organizing itself. Like we get a cut and it heals. There's a natural mechanism for the mind to find its clarity, to find its wholeness. If we let it go, if we keep on poking the cut, it's not going to be able to heal. And this is what we do often with compulsive thinking. So I began to get at why I was compulsively thinking all the time, till I had disentangled all of that and brought myself into empowered alignment and experienced the expansiveness. So as I began to call my power back to me, I began to have a greater mastery over chi, over energy in my body. And part of the process, a big part of my process, was working on cultivating energy in the body and learning traditional Chinese medicine, Neigong, Neidan, and inner alchemical arts such as Qigong, and of course practicing them. And I developed a greater capacity to cultivate energy in my body, which opened up many of the energy channels in my system, which was also part of the process of increasing the imaginative force. And through this, I became much more aware of the meridians and the subtle energy channels and my energy flow between these sometimes disparate channels in the body, but all connected. And I began to integrate to a greater level what it is to be an energy being. And many of the systems or cyclings of the body, of the orbits and the energy centers, are not new to my awareness, but having a more stabilized center in the energy body is, and adopting a much different way of being in the world as a result of this is what is developing, or what was developed and what is developing. And this is a complete shift in how I take in energy at a fundamental level, because as I know myself more and more as energy, I experience myself. This isn't just belief, this is knowledge. And when I experience myself as energy, there's certain energetic upkeepings that I do. There's a certain standard of holding my energy in state. And part of that is aligning the system, which is partly done through the meditation and the daily devotional decree that I alluded to that didn't fully explain. And part of that is a number of internal processes and practices to clear stagnant energy from the system, to tonify or bring in energy, and to balance the energies in the system at a more in-depth way than I had done before. And there's also a different way in which I'm absorbing energy and following that pathway of energy. Till now, the habit pattern was to often, not always, often go towards food and other sources of energy to not only fill me with energy, food, like calorie, but also fill me emotionally. Because you do the ayahuasca diet there, and you're often eating, I was often eating one time a day. I had an opportunity to shift my system to taking in inspiration as a more prime source of energy. Inspiration being a twofold there. Inspiration being inspiration, like the intuitive impulse from the soul to be like, I want to draw. And actually being willing to go there instead of having the mind and the mind viruses say, but you need to make money, or whatever else counteracts the authentic impulse that I had learned somewhere along the way not to listen to as my dominant guidance system in life. And also inspiration as the breath. Taking time to breathe more deeply into my body, to know it more deeply. And there's a certain point when you stop physically breathing and you move more into the energy body, and breath becomes a whole different thing. The way we talk about breath is, well, it's more taking in chi than breath, right? And sometimes people translate chi as breath, which has some value, but it's not a great translation, because chi is an aspect of breath. It's just a different vital component of it. It's not the oxygen. And one learns to work with chi, you can breathe into any part of your body. And this doesn't make sense if you just speak about the breath being oxygen going to the lungs, yeah? So there's a limitation to the value of the way of speaking to the chi as breath. But there's an certain expansive force and quality that is very reminiscent of breathing that takes place when one breathes, so to speak, quote unquote, into their shoulder, or breathes into their kidney. As one becomes more progressed in their sensing of subtle energy and their capacity to draw it in and to send it to different parts of the body, this can create a lot more capacity to expand, to open the body, to receive more breath, yeah? Because the mechanism of breathing is based on a pressure system of the internal environment in the lungs and the external environment of the atmosphere, pressure. The change in pressure happens when we open our body and then we relax. We contract and relax. There's a ebb and flow to the system, yeah? But over time, due to unprocessed emotion, limiting beliefs, and trauma, and imbalances in the alignments of the system, we lose the capacity to open ourselves to life. This is not just a physical thing, this is a metaphor for our basic engagement with the fundamental force of creation. So as I moved more and more into my body, I would bring the expansive force of calling in more energy into different regions of my body that had been contracted. And this is part of the reason why a lot of the emotions were coming up, the fear-based beliefs and all these things came more and more into my awareness. As I mentioned, I was able to see myself with greater clarity and truth, yeah? And one of the reasons why I was able to do this was because I was doing this internal energetic work. It's like the deeper internal mind-body mapping. And from that, experiencing myself at a greater level of energy and awareness. Ooh, 56 minutes. Maybe I'll just do the heart and then we'll stop there. The heart is a big one, so I might have to get partway through it. Maybe I'll make another one of these. Depends if it's really, really exciting. So the heart, this is an area, bringing the energies into, feeling how I'd been contracted and guarded and held, and then getting at why. What can I do to expand my love? What can I do to expand my heart? Well, one of the major processes that I'm on for the last 8 years is I'm single, and I've been single for 8 years. And this is obviously too long of a journey, and I'm not going to talk about that whole 8-year cycle and all the process that's gone on with that. But the point I'm at now is I'm in love. I'm in love, but there's nobody I'm in love with, unless you could technically say me. But I'm not in love with anyone as I've ever loved anyone, as far as I can recollect in this life. It's a love that doesn't confuse somebody outside of myself with the source of that love. What I'm learning, what I'm surrendering into, is loving myself in the ways that I once loved others, and treating myself like the person that I am most devoted to, that I love most. And as I developed this practice, I realized how little I was doing this previously. And that's just an awareness when we grow of contrast. Nothing to be judged on, because that's always going to be the case. We're always going to come into a new level of awareness and be like, oh yeah, I totally wasn't doing that. So my journey was to cultivate a deep love by connecting with who I am, allowing myself to be me. These are all such simple things, yeah? Not. Because of the layers of conditioning and fear-based beliefs and all the things, we can lose ourselves. I've lost myself for many, many years into thinking I'm other people, some personality. I didn't allow myself to sing for so many years because I couldn't even sing on my own because of my own self-judgment of my voice. I couldn't allow myself just to feel good and sing. So I allowed myself that time. Even dancing. I'm a very free dancer at times, but at times I'm so controlling and rigid and judgmental that I don't allow myself just to move my body expressively, just because it feels good, not for any aim, right? That it's like that masculine force, not the healthy masculine. It's the survival-based aspect of my masculine force controlling and not allowing the balance, the harmony that comes when East meets West, when the masculine and feminine forces have greater balance. So I made time to honor my inner feminine and struck balance in life between my planning and all the things that the healthy part of my masculine loves to do, But because of the pattern I had been living in, being an entrepreneur, I had gotten so deep in that masculine force that I put off the feminine. It's not that I haven't developed it to a high degree, not that I don't work with it actively, but there's a greater balance that my life was missing. And I was able to find that harmony within myself by allowing those forces to work together, to come into complete stillness and then activity, to go deep within and then to go outside of myself and create. There's many ways to work these energies to call them into greater harmony within oneself, but I struck a greater balance with that. And I was able to love myself at a deeper level. And I got into many of my relationship-based fears, such as intimacy fading and fear of being cheated on, fear of being off my path because I sacrifice myself for love. And I went through all of these using muscle testing and a big list that was provided by a book, and touched into these fears in other ways. And I went through all of them and I disentangled them, just as I was talking about in the beginning, getting at what the belief structure is underneath and what that's all tied into. Where did that come from? What are the basic emotions? Can I release that? What is the new story? How should I empower that? How can I act? Action is key. How can I act in accordance with the new structure so that it's embodied, it's experienced, and I can continue to walk that prayer into reality till it becomes my default mode and I no longer have to actively do it, then I can just live it. So I did that with intimacy, and I developed systems within myself of showing up to that relationship in the way that I want to, by taking a greater responsibility for my state and the love that I have within that is not dependent on that person, so that I can take responsibility and offer myself the power of being fully committed to my love and my truth, which I can continue to uphold in a relationship. See, the power dynamic is really key. I'm taking all the power and I'm filling my own cup with it, so that when I do attract this individual, I'm attracting them from my wholeness. And I'm setting up a standard of how I will relate based on my most fundamental relationship, which is with myself. And to the degree I can love myself in a beautiful way is to the degree I can love another. And because this process is so damn satisfying, all that urgency to find that other completely dissolves, to the degree I can dissolve in my own love. So there's a beautiful gauging that I have, and in the moment I'm not really experiencing it at all, but when I know that I'm desiring partner, I'm falling out of it. Like the desire, not the healthy desire, the unhealthy attachment desire, then I know I'm not in it, because I'm projecting outside of myself something that I'm not meeting within myself. So my work has been, and I've been very successful on this one, is holding that level of self-love so that I'm not seeking in. What happens is, just like when the mind viruses of the fears of all the reasons why I can't just be still and be, so too there are various different decisions that I make and energies that influence my mind from choosing the highest reality based on seeking desires outside of the self. And I'm talking about desire, and I'm feeling like I could go on a big rant about desire, because I've spoken about it in a few different ways: good desire, bad desire, and I don't think I've fully articulated that in a very coherent way, and there's much more to elucidate from that, which have a lot of good teachings, but I'm not going to go over that here, so maybe a different episode. We're still on love and self-care. One of the things that I started doing, and I've never done this before to the degree I have, is really talking to myself in a way that I want to be talked to, and that I would love to share with somebody else. And at first I started doing it for somebody else because that was easier to tap into. And I was offering words of praise. How beautiful they are, how thoughtful they are, how present they are, the way that they move, their intelligence, their dedication, their devotion. And then I did this for myself. And this is where it's like, being in a beautiful place helps us so much, because when one's in a beautiful state and they're feeling good in their body, it's so much easier to receive, yeah? But I received the words, in any case, in a way that I hadn't been able to receive in the past. And I started to be able to tap into and like crack down the shield of my own heart by offering myself the words that I know to be true, but deny myself because not my thoughts, but thoughts of other people that I had internalized, or judgments of myself. And I say not my thoughts. I am taking ownership for them, but I'm saying they're not mine because they're not true. They're not really my thoughts. Like, they're not my soul thinking, because my soul doesn't think in terms of my limitations and doesn't judge me. Yeah, makes sense like that. So I started to disentangle that, and I started to praise myself and offer myself, and I started to acknowledge things that are true about me, that I'm creative, that I'm intelligent, that I'm smart. And I actually felt those things. Once again, this is like, we always come to a new level and we think, oh, this is the first time I've actually breathed well, right? So I'm saying this because this is what the experience was, but this is like a never-ending ladder. But I actually acknowledge and experience these things within myself. I'm like, oh yeah, I am beautiful. Oh yeah, I am intelligent. And because I actually allowed those affirmations to land, I was like, well, what would an intelligent person do? And then my behavior patterns started changing. I started doing more intelligent things. I was like, oh my goodness, this is so easy. And my state started to be so damn good. Like, I felt so damn good. And I was like, I was waiting this whole time to acknowledge myself. And in that acknowledgement, I started to see the things that were already true, which had always been true, because I believe that there's certain things our soul comes into this life, this incarnation to experience, and they're all a part of it already. It's more about remembering and tapping in. So in that sense, what I was doing, I was remembering to a greater degree than I ever had, like a big leap, and that's why I felt like I had never done these things before, even though I had. But I'd made a big leap in that, and it's like an acknowledgement of who I am. And this is when coming home, which was so beautiful, it was an acknowledgement of not only where I'm at is perfectly in relation to where I need to be to live out my destiny and my highest dreams, but also the recognition that I am the being that I want to be. The funny thing being, of course, that I've been the being that I wanted to be my entire life. But there's this like calibration of the mind actually softening enough its judgments and its conditioning to actually know itself, to be inverted enough without projecting all over itself, to get a real taste. Maybe it's just a taste. Maybe I know myself more. I don't know. But it tastes pretty damn good, and I like it. So the self-talk was really important. And once again, experiencing it like I had never experienced it before, it's like knowing myself moment to moment emotionally. So the pointing there is that perhaps in the past, I hadn't been as consistently emotionally available. Why would that be? Well, running from myself because of things I may not have wanted to experience within myself, because of a habit pattern reaction to not experience discomfort and to orient towards pleasure, or based on a lot of the fear-based beliefs that have been like mind viruses in my mind, preventing me from just surrendering into my being because of belief systems that prevented it from thinking it's where it's at, or it's good enough, or from seeing itself as it is, or from seeing life as it is, as in perfect harmony. So as those began to soften, I began to be able to speak to the deeper parts of me, the different parts of me, my child, my inner masculine, my inner feminine, all these different aspects of me came to the surface. My inner world was taking up a greater stage. And my imaginative capacity was growing, and these were taking on forms. So the internal reality was become ever more vivid, more entrancing, more beautiful than the external reality. And I noticed the shift of me being oriented outwards in the five sense reality to shifting inwards as the dominant energies began to defaultly, without effort, shift internally. I detached externally from the external world and a lot of the conditioning that comes with that, because when you look within and you're willing to see what's within, there's greater clarity and truth. It's greater self-knowing, and there's greater access to the infinite potential and power of the creative life force. And I'll end this episode by ending with love. And one of the other gems that I got is I have a connection with my soulmate that I've never met. Yeah, I talked a little bit about me falling in love before I met her. It's like I can go beyond time space, go into the future, and of the many timelines, I can connect with a soul who feels like home. And I feel her now. So there's no rush to get to anywhere, and I know there's divine timing, and I can just surrender more deeply into my being. And I can't say I'm always feeling this at the level that I feel it now and that I feel it most of the time, because fear-based beliefs still come up, yeah? But they're so much more obvious because the majority of time is spent in a positive state. When things come up, when tensions come up, they're so visceral and obvious. And I have capacity to deal with them. And why would I not want to? Why would I not want to? I want to stay in a preferably beautiful state. I want to stay in alignment with my dreams. So I notice these fear-based beliefs and they still come up, yeah? So I put on a ring. I put on a ring that I got from my grandfather who's passed away. My grandfather who had a successful marriage till he passed. And my parents who've had a successful marriage of, well, over 35 years, I believe now. So I put this ring on and I felt the power of my grandfather. And the intention came to my mind is like, put the ring on as if it's a wedding ring. And the process or the practice there is to step into that, right? If you've heard a little bit about dream manifestation, you may be familiar with the formula that is always variable in its steps, but has some connection to this basis blueprint of connecting, getting clear on what you want as the future moment, and then knowing with absolute certainty that it's going to happen, so much so that you can sit in its energy. You can allow its energies to be in this present moment. And your capacity to maintain connection with that will attract you towards it, yeah? So putting on this ring is a reminder to step into that level of certainty and love. And it's a powerful process for me, because that connects me not only with my future partner, but my desire for children. And as this connects, it aligns my system up in a way where it's integrated at a higher level with not only my desires for this moment, which can often be based more on food and sex and immediate pleasures of the such, but there's a calibration towards a higher vision, yeah, of my partner, of children. This is also not the ring, but this is also the way I calibrate myself with my dreams and my connection to the all and my purpose here on this earth. But the ring is a powerful one for me to connect, and I feel that ring. I feel my grandfather. I feel the alignment of that. And that helps me to anchor in my prayers. So that's one of the mechanisms that I integrate my experience, and I hold the energies of the container that I was in addition to the daily devotional decree and the comprehensive holistic alignment coaching system that I created, which I had a lot of clarity on and development. So that's a little bit about some of my reflections of the inner work that I did. We didn't get to the throat, the psyche, seventh chakra, or so many other things. Just a few as like something I'll just read off at the end here. Some of the clarities that I received. kind of more of like a shotgun style or machine gun style. So I had a lot of clarity on my spiritual path. I feel like this is an important process for individuals to go on. As we become conscious, we make choices. The wave function, in some sense, collapse as a metaphor between either a wave or I forget what it is, a dot, a moment. Okay, I totally just bashed that. Anyways, we make choices, yeah? This or that. And this is what actually drives the engine of creation forward, is us making those choices. So along our spiritual path, we can change, but there's opportunities where we make choices which set up the manifest stage. So part of that is knowing if you're dualistic or if you're non-dual. Part of that is determining if you believe in celibacy or no celibacy or some relationship between both of those, which is my stance, as well as non-duality. If you're a solo cultivator or a dual cultivator, it's a Qigong one. If you use plant medicines, no plant medicines, if you're going to eat meat, there's all these different things, right? And we can go by and get our value systems all structured. So I made a lot of clarity in my path. And one of the big ones that I've been working with is, because I study Qigong, yoga, and work with plant medicines, among other spiritual practices, it's always in my mind, or it has frequently been, let me rearrange that. It has frequently been in my mind, especially in the last few years, of I need to pick a path, that urgency or that desire to specialize in one thing, because in some sense, perhaps, I would go further in any one spiritual field if I focus all of my energies there, yeah? That makes sense. But my recognition is that's not my design, that's not who I am, and that doesn't resonate with me as much as the multivariate path. So there's the path, and then there's the pathless path. My understanding of myself is that the pathless path is most advantageous. And I had been denying this aspect of myself, and it had been plaguing me because that thought had been persistently nagging at me. And when I surrendered into this, my vision opened up in how I can mix the different paths that I do in a way that feels harmonious for me. Once again, we're at the end here. I'm machine gunning, so we're not going to get into that. But that was really big for me. Also, I created more harmony in my capacity to envision and connect with the future of being in a relationship and being so developed on my spiritual process, because it takes so much time. Yeah, there's a ceiling to how much spiritual evolution I can do if I'm not meditating 24/7. Yeah, it's just the reality. There's some people in caves who will progress in certain lines of development, yeah, but along a certain spiritual trajectory much more than I can, because I can only meditate a few hours a day currently, and there's a ceiling to that. And part of my ego is like, am I just going to become a monk? And then there was a surrendering, which I had been guarded to and from, who knows, to just allowing myself to get to wherever I'm going to get to, and take into account all the many desires that I have, such as those for love and relationship and community and spending time with parents and not being in a cave. And I didn't allow myself to acknowledge that that is just as important as the traditional trajectory of meditation and energy awareness, etc. So I created harmony, and because I wasn't divided on that, I was able to once again have clarity in my vision of what my future may look like, which was previously clouded because of those limitations. So I addressed the naggingness of the mind. The mind is here to help us, yeah? Okay. So my note here is that the path is internal and it's not contingent on external. So this kind of gets at the heart of what I'm expressing here, what I just expressed, is in the misunderstanding is that being in a relationship or making certain decisions, that I'll make a wrong decision. I'll choose the wrong partner, or I'll choose a path that isn't my highest path, which has a truth to it, and not because it's internal. Whatever is happening on the external, we can't get into a situation that isn't the perfect vantage point for us to be on our highest path. There's an internal mechanism at play. And when I embody this wisdom at a deep level, this is where I know that my spiritual path is contingent upon me, and the power is within me. And I had been giving that power away, thinking that something can go wrong in the external world that could throw me off. And that's shit thinking. It just doesn't work well. And same with being in a relationship. If I fall in love with somebody, that's the path. How fucking obvious is that? There's no fear that I need to have about it not working out, or it's going to throw me off my spiritual process, because the power is within me. The love is within me. So there was this process of, to a greater degree, embodying that wisdom out of intellectualization and perceiving the world as such and acting in the world as such. Greater embodiment and authenticity came. Greater integration of living as an energy being. My daily devotional decree and the internal external principles. Greater vision. Greater capacity to be in no mind. Letting go of the mind viruses. Oh, there's so much. There's so much. Could have a whole podcast series on this. And I'm so stoked. I'm so stoked to share. I'm so stoked to share my life, because over the last few years, I've been sharing a lot, and a lot of what's held me back through sharing in the way that I want to and showing up in the way that I want to has been due to the content that I've shared in this episode. It feels so good to be where I'm at and be surrendered into it with acceptance, with surrender. And I'm excited. I'm excited to continue to grow and create, knowing that it's not just me creating. The mind of God is at will and at work here. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful for Wheeler, for the curandero there, for the center, for the opportunity that I did give myself, but ultimately it takes a lot more individuals than just me to create something like that. So there's so many other supporting forces than me saying yes, but I did say yes, and I'm grateful for it. And I'm going to continue, as I have been doing boldly this year, to say yes to everything that excites me, hierarchically. The ones that are most exciting, not just any little excitement, the ones that really excite me. If they're there, I've said yes this year. And it's taken my life on a beautiful path, and it's going to continue to guide me. All my relations, Aya Om.